My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm 28 years old. If someone had told me 3 months ago that the man I planned to marry would shatter my entire existence with a single revelation, I would have laughed in their face. Love makes fools of us all, they say, but I never imagined how prophetic those words would become in my life. It started on what should have been the happiest day of my life. The morning sun filtered through our bedroom curtains, casting golden rays across David's sleeping face. We had been together for 4 years, living together for 2, and yesterday he had finally proposed. The ring still felt foreign on my finger, catching the light as I admired it for the 100th time since he slipped it on. David stirred beside me, his dark hair tousled against the pillow. When he opened his eyes and saw me watching him, that familiar smile spread across his lips, the same smile that had captured my heart during our first coffee date at that little cafe downtown. He reached for my hand, bringing it to his lips to kiss my knuckles just above the engagement ring. "Good morning, fiancé," he whispered, his voice still rough with sleep. My heart fluttered at the word. Fiancé. After years of wondering if this moment would ever come, it felt surreal. We had talked about marriage countless times, but David always seemed to find reasons to wait. His career was demanding, he wanted to save more money, he wasn't ready for such a big step. I had begun to worry that maybe I wasn't the one he truly wanted to spend his life with. But yesterday changed everything. He had planned the most romantic evening, complete with dinner at the restaurant where we had our first official date, followed by a moonlit walk through Central Park. When he dropped to one knee beside the fountain where we had shared our first kiss, I couldn't hold back the tears. Now, lying in bed beside him, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. David worked as a financial consultant, often traveling for work, but he always made time for us. He remembered the little things, my favorite flowers, how I liked my coffee, the way I needed exactly 17 minutes to get ready in the morning. He was attentive, caring, and until yesterday, I thought he was everything I could ever want in a partner. "I love you," I whispered, tracing patterns on his chest with my fingertip. "I love you too," he replied, but something in his voice seemed different. Distant, perhaps. When I looked up at his face, his eyes were focused on the ceiling rather than on me. A small knot of unease formed in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. He was probably just tired from the excitement of yesterday. The morning routine proceeded as normal. David showered while I made coffee, and we shared breakfast while discussing our weekend plans. He had suggested we visit his parents to share the good news, and I was excited to finally have something concrete to celebrate with his family. They had always been kind to me, but I sometimes felt like they were waiting for David to make his intentions clear before fully accepting me into their circle. As David gathered his things for work, I noticed he seemed more hurried than usual. His phone buzzed constantly, and he kept glancing at it with an expression I couldn't quite read. When I asked if everything was okay, he simply nodded and said it was just work stress. "I might be late tonight," he said, kissing me goodbye at the door. "There's a big presentation tomorrow, and the team wants to go over everything one more time." I understood. David's job was demanding, and I had learned to be flexible with his schedule. It was one of the many compromises I had made over the years, believing that our love was strong enough to weather any storm. After he left, I found myself staring at my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me had bright eyes filled with hope and dreams of a future I had been planning for years. I worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, a job I loved because it allowed me creativity and flexibility. David and I had often talked about starting our own business together someday, combining his financial expertise with my creative skills. That afternoon, I decided to surprise him. I knew he had been stressed about work lately, so I planned to bring him dinner at his office. I spent the entire afternoon preparing his favorite meal, homemade lasagna with garlic bread and a small salad. I even stopped by the bakery to pick up those chocolate eclairs he loved so much. The walk to his office building filled me with excitement. I imagined his surprised expression when I appeared at his desk with dinner. Maybe we could eat together in the conference room, steal a few quiet moments in the middle of his busy day. These small gestures had always been important to our relationship, little ways of showing we cared despite our hectic schedules. The elevator ride to the 15th floor seemed longer than usual. I balanced the food containers carefully, making sure everything stayed warm. David's assistant, Monica, usually stayed late on busy days, so I expected to see her at her desk when the elevator doors opened. But the office was quieter than I expected. Most of the lights were off, and only a few people remained at their desks. Monica's station was empty, her computer screen dark. I walked down the familiar hallway toward David's corner office, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor. His office door was slightly ajar, and I could hear voices inside. I paused, not wanting to interrupt if he was in an important meeting. But as I listened more carefully, I realized there were only two voices, David's and a woman's. The tone of their conversation seemed intimate, too personal for a business discussion. My heart began to race, though I told myself there was surely an innocent explanation. David worked with many female colleagues, and he had always been friendly and professional with everyone. Still, something about the hushed quality of their voices made me hesitate at the door. "We can't keep doing this," the woman was saying. "It's getting too complicated." "I know," David replied, his voice heavy with emotion I had never heard before. "But I can't just walk away. You mean too much to me." The food containers suddenly felt impossibly heavy in my hands. My mouth went dry, and a cold sensation spread through my chest. I knew I should announce myself, knock on the door, give them a chance to explain what I was obviously misunderstanding. But my feet seemed rooted to the floor. "What about Sarah?" the woman asked. "You proposed to her yesterday. How can you do this to her?" The mention of my name sent a shock through my system. I pressed myself against the wall beside the door, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they would hear it. The woman knew about the proposal. She knew about me. But who was she? "Sarah is. Sarah is safe," David said after a long pause. "She's predictable. She'll give me the stable life I'm supposed to want. But with you." "With me, what?" the woman pressed. "With you, I feel alive. I feel like myself. I've been living a lie for so long, pretending to be the man everyone expects me to be. When I'm with you, I don't have to pretend." The words hit me like physical blows. Safe. Predictable. A lie. For years of my life, for years of believing in our love, and he saw me as nothing more than a convenient choice for the life he thought he should have. I wanted to burst through that door, to confront them both, to demand an explanation. But another part of me needed to hear more, needed to understand the full scope of what I was discovering. "I love you," the woman said, her voice breaking slightly. "But I can't be your secret anymore. It's destroying me." "I love you too," David replied without hesitation. More than I've ever loved anyone. More than I thought I was capable of loving. Those words shattered something inside me. He had said those exact words to me countless times, but hearing him say them to someone else with such raw emotion made me realize how hollow they had always sounded when directed at me. I don't remember dropping the food containers, but suddenly they were on the floor, the crash echoing through the quiet hallway. The voices inside the office stopped abruptly, and I heard David's chair scrape against the floor as he stood up quickly. "What was that?" the woman asked. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could do was stare at the mess of food scattered across the hallway floor, the carefully prepared meal now ruined and forgotten. It seemed like a perfect metaphor for my life in that moment. "Sarah?" David's voice called out tentatively. I forced my legs to carry me backward, away from his office, away from the conversation that had just destroyed my world. I made it to the elevator and pressed the button repeatedly, desperate to escape before he could find me. The elevator doors opened just as I heard his office door slam shut behind me. During the ride down to the lobby, I caught sight of myself in the elevator's mirrored walls. The woman looking back at me was unrecognizable. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock and pain. The engagement ring on her finger suddenly felt like a weight, a symbol of everything that had been built on lies. I stumbled out of the building and into the evening air, not sure where to go or what to do. My phone was buzzing insistently in my purse, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. I knew it would be David, probably trying to call and explain, to find some way to minimize what I had overheard. The walk home took forever. Every step felt mechanical, as if I was moving through water. People passed by on the sidewalk, living their normal lives, unaware that my entire existence had just crumbled in the space of a few overheard sentences. When I finally reached our apartment, I stood outside the door for several minutes, key in hand. This place had been our sanctuary, filled with memories and dreams and plans for the future. Now it felt like a museum of illusions, every piece of furniture and every photograph a reminder of the lie I had been living. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, immediately confronted by the engagement celebration from the night before. Rose petals were still scattered across the coffee table, and the champagne bottle sat empty beside two glasses. The scene that had filled me with joy just hours earlier now made me sick to my stomach. My phone rang again, David's name flashing on the screen. This time I answered, though I couldn't find words to speak. "Sarah, where are you?" His voice was frantic. "Monica said she saw you leaving the building." What happened? There was food all over the hallway outside my office. "I know," I managed to whisper. The silence that followed stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, probably trying to figure out exactly how much I had heard. "Sarah, please. Let me explain. It's not what you think." The cliché of his words would have been laughable if they hadn't been so devastating. How many betrayed partners had heard those exact words throughout history? How many had believed them, desperate to hold on to the illusion of love? Whose voice was that? I asked, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. "Who were you talking to?" Another long pause. I could practically hear him calculating, trying to decide how much truth he could get away with revealing. It was Rebecca. From the marketing department. We were discussing the presentation, and things got a little personal. "You know how stressful work has been lately." Rebecca. I had met her at several office parties over the years. She was beautiful in a way that made other women feel invisible, tall, elegant, with the kind of confidence I had always envied. I remember David mentioning her name occasionally, usually in the context of work projects, but now I wondered how many of those late nights and business dinners had actually involved her. How long? The question came out before I could stop myself. How long what? Don't play games with me, David. How long have you been in love with her? I heard him inhale sharply, and I knew my directness had caught him off guard. He had probably expected me to accept his weak explanation, to pretend I hadn't heard what I clearly heard. Sarah, you're being dramatic. You misunderstood what you heard. I heard you tell her you love her more than you've ever loved anyone. I heard you call our relationship a lie. I heard you say I'm just the safe, predictable choice. My voice was getting stronger, fueled by anger that was finally beginning to cut through the shock. You don't understand the context. Then explain it to me. Explain how telling another woman you love her while wearing an engagement ring I accepted less than 24 hours ago has some innocent context I'm missing. The silence stretched on so long I thought he might have hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, more defeated. I never meant for you to find out this way. Those words confirmed everything I had feared. There was no innocent explanation, no misunderstanding. He had been living a double life, and I had been too trusting, too blinded by what I thought was love, to see the signs. How long, David? I repeated. 2 years, he whispered. 2 years. Half of our relationship. While I had been planning our future, believing in our love, building dreams around the life we would share, he had been in love with someone else. I sank onto the couch, still holding the phone to my ear, trying to process the magnitude of his betrayal. 2 years of lies, 2 years of pretending, 2 years of making love to me while his heart belonged to another woman. Why did you propose? The question came out as barely a whisper. Because I thought it was what I was supposed to do. My parents kept asking when I was going to make things official with you. Everyone at work assumed we would get married eventually. I thought maybe if I committed to you, my feelings for Rebecca would fade. His honesty was somehow more brutal than his lies had been. I hadn't been proposed to out of love or desire to spend his life with me. I had been proposed to as a solution to his guilt, a way to force himself into the life everyone expected him to live. And Rebecca? What does she want? She wants me to leave you. She's been patient, but she can't wait anymore. She wants us to be together openly. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine what the past 2 years must have been like for her. Loving a man who was committed to someone else, waiting in the shadows, hoping he would choose her over the safe, predictable option. Are you going to? I asked. Another pause. Are you asking if I'm going to leave you? I'm asking if you love her enough to stop living a lie. I don't know where those words came from. Part of me was amazed at my own composure, at my ability to have this conversation without completely falling apart. Maybe I was in shock, or maybe somewhere deep inside, I had always known this day would come. Sarah, I care about you. You're important to me. We have history together. That's not what I asked. Yes, he said finally. Yes, I love her enough to stop living a lie. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of our apartment, watching the evening light fade through the windows. The engagement ring felt impossibly heavy on my finger, a symbol of everything I had believed in that had turned out to be false. I thought about all the signs I had missed or ignored. The way David seemed distracted during our conversations. The increase in late nights and business trips. The subtle changes in our physical intimacy, how it had felt more perfunctory over the past year. His reluctance to set a wedding date, always finding reasons to wait. How could I have been so blind? How could I have convinced myself that his hesitation was just career stress or normal pre-commitment anxiety? The truth had been right in front of me, but I had refused to see it because seeing it would have meant acknowledging that the love I believed in was an illusion. I pulled off the engagement ring and set it on the coffee table beside the empty champagne bottle. The sound of David's key in the lock came sooner than I expected. I had been sitting in the same position on the couch for what felt like hours, watching the shadows lengthen across the room as the sun set completely. When the door opened, I didn't turn to look at him. "Sarah." His voice was hesitant, unsure. I heard him set down his briefcase and walk across the room, but he stopped several feet away from the couch, as if afraid to come closer. "We need to talk," he said. "I think we've said everything that needs to be said. Please. Look at me." I turned my head and saw him standing there in his perfectly pressed suit, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked like the same man I had woken up beside that morning, but everything about him seemed different now. Or maybe I was the one who had changed, finally seeing him clearly for the first time. His eyes fell on the engagement ring sitting on the coffee table, and his shoulders sagged slightly. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said. "But you did hurt me. For 2 years, you've been hurting me every single day by pretending to be someone you're not." He moved closer and sat down in the armchair across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I tried to make it work between us. I really did. In the beginning, what we had felt real. I thought I could build a life with you. But you couldn't love me the way you love her." He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with whether to continue being honest or to try to spare my feelings. "No," he said finally. "I couldn't." The simple honesty of his admission was both devastating and oddly comforting. At least now I knew the truth, painful as it was. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know. I've never been in this situation before. Have you told Rebecca that I know?" He shook his head. "I came straight here after you hung up on me." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below where people were going about their evening routines. Normal people with normal problems, not sitting in their living rooms having conversations about the complete destruction of everything they thought they knew about love. "I can't stay here tonight," I said without turning around. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. But I can't be in this apartment with you right now." I heard him stand up behind me. "Sarah, maybe we can work through this. Maybe we can find a way to." "To what?" I turned to face him. "To pretend that you haven't been in love with another woman for half of our relationship? To build a marriage on the foundation of your settling for someone you see as safe and predictable?" He had no answer for that, which was answer enough. I went to our bedroom and pulled a suitcase from the closet, filling it with enough clothes for several days. David followed me, hovering in the doorway as if unsure whether he should help or stay out of my way. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a while," I said, folding clothes mechanically. "I need time to think, to figure out what comes next." How long? I don't know. Sarah, please. Don't make any permanent decisions while you're upset. I stopped packing and looked at him. What permanent decisions do you think I'm going to make? You're the one who's been living a double life. You're the one who has to choose between the woman you're supposed to want and the woman you actually love. I'm just trying to survive the aftermath of your choices. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my sister Emma. Still on for dinner tomorrow? Can't wait to hear all about the engagement. The irony was almost too much to bear. Emma had been so excited when I called her yesterday to share the news. She had immediately started planning an engagement party, talking about wedding dates and venues, living vicariously through what she thought was the happiest moment of my life. I have to tell people, I said, more to myself than to David. Tell them what? That the engagement is off. That the wedding isn't happening. That the man I thought I was going to marry has been in love with someone else for 2 years. David winced at the bluntness of my words. Maybe we don't have to tell them anything yet. Maybe we can figure things out first. I zipped up my suitcase and faced him. There's nothing to figure out, David. You love Rebecca. You want to be with Rebecca. The only reason you're hesitating is because it's easier to stay with me than to face the consequences of your choices. That's not true. Isn't it? You said yourself that I'm safe and predictable. That being with me is the life you're supposed to want. But that's not the same as the life you actually want, is it? He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. We both knew I was right. I picked up my suitcase and walked past him toward the front door. In the living room, I stopped and picked up the engagement ring from the coffee table, holding it for a moment in my palm. It was beautiful, a classic solitaire setting with a perfect round diamond. David had chosen it carefully, probably spending weeks researching the best options, making sure it met all the traditional expectations for an engagement ring. But it had never really been meant for me. It had been meant for the woman he thought he should marry, not the woman he wanted to marry. I set the ring down beside his keys and walked to the door. Sarah, wait. I turned back to him one last time. I hope you'll be happy with her, I said. I hope what you have is worth everything you gave up to get it. Emma's apartment was across town, in a neighborhood I had always loved for its tree-lined streets and charming brownstones. She opened the door before I could even knock, her face immediately shifting from excitement to concern when she saw my suitcase and the expression on my face. What happened? She asked, pulling me inside. Emma was 3 years older than me, and she had always been my protector, my confidant. The person I turned to in life became too much to handle alone. She had never particularly liked David, though she had kept her opinions mostly to herself. Looking back, I wondered if she had seen something I had missed, some sign that all was not as perfect as I had believed. I collapsed onto her couch and told her everything. The overheard conversation, the 2-year affair, the proposal that had been motivated by obligation rather than love. Emma listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, processing everything I had shared. I'm so sorry, she said finally, reaching over to take my hand. I can't imagine how you must be feeling. I don't know what I'm feeling, I admitted. Betrayed, obviously. Angry. But also relieved? Is that terrible? Relieved? I think part of me always knew something was wrong. The way he looked at me sometimes, like he was seeing someone else. The way our conversations felt scripted, like he was playing a role. I kept telling myself it was just the normal evolution of a long-term relationship, but now I wonder if he was never really present with me at all. Emma squeezed my hand. That doesn't make his betrayal any less painful. No, it doesn't. But it makes me feel less crazy for all the doubts I had that I kept pushing aside. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Emma had always been good at giving me space to process my emotions without trying to rush me toward any particular conclusion. "What are you going to do?" she asked eventually. "I don't know. I can't go back to him, not after this. But I don't know how to move forward either. Everything I thought I wanted was based on a lie." "What did you want?" I thought about her question carefully. I wanted a partner who chose me every day, not someone who settled for me because I was the safe option. I wanted someone who looked at me the way David looks at Rebecca, like I was the most important person in his world. "You deserve that." Do I? Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm just not the kind of woman who inspires that kind of love. Emma shook her head firmly. "Don't you dare blame yourself for his inability to love you the way you deserved. His feelings for Rebecca don't diminish your worth, they reveal his character." That night, I lay awake in Emma's guest room, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of my relationship with David. I thought about our first date, how nervous he had seemed, how he had stumbled over his words when asking if he could see me again. Had that nervousness been about me, or had he already been involved with someone else even then? I thought about the first time he said he loved me, 6 months into our relationship. We had been walking through the park after dinner, and he had stopped suddenly, taken my hands in his, and said the words with such sincerity that I had felt like my heart might burst with happiness. But now I wondered if he had been trying to convince himself as much as he was telling me. I thought about moving in together, how excited I had been to create a shared space, to build a life with someone I loved. David had seemed enthusiastic too, but I remembered how he had insisted on keeping some of his things at his old place just in case. At the time, I had thought it was sweet that he didn't want to rush things. Now I realized he had been keeping an escape route. The worst part was remembering all the times I had felt something was off but had talked myself out of trusting my instincts. The nights when he came home late and seemed distant. The weekends when he claimed to be working but couldn't provide specific details about his projects. The way he sometimes looked right through me when I was talking, as if his mind was somewhere else entirely. I had been so afraid of being the jealous, insecure girlfriend that I had ignored every warning sign my intuition had tried to give me. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from David. "I know you need space, but please don't make any decisions while you're angry." What we had was real, even if it wasn't everything you wanted it to be. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. What we had was real. How could he claim that when he had just admitted to being in love with someone else for half of our relationship? Another message came through. "I talked to Rebecca tonight. I told her that you know about us. She feels terrible about the pain this has caused you." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Rebecca felt terrible. The woman who had been sleeping with my fiancé for 2 years felt terrible that I had found out about it. A third message: "We want to do right by everyone involved. Can we meet tomorrow to talk about how to handle this situation? We want to do right by everyone involved." As if this was a business negotiation rather than the destruction of my entire life. I turned off my phone and buried my face in the pillow, finally allowing myself to cry. The next morning brought a clarity I hadn't expected. I woke up feeling empty but strangely calm, as if the storm of emotions from the previous day had burned through me and left behind something cleaner and more focused. Emma made coffee and breakfast, moving around her kitchen with the kind of efficient care that reminded me why I had always felt safe with her. She didn't ask how I was feeling or try to offer advice. She simply created a peaceful space for me to exist, and while I figured out what came next. I need to go back to the apartment today, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. I need to get more of my things. Do you want me to come with you? No. I think I need to do this alone. Emma nodded, understanding that some battles had to be fought in solitude. I spent the morning making lists, practical things that helped me feel like I had some control over a situation that felt completely chaotic. Things I needed to retrieve from the apartment. People I needed to tell about the broken engagement. Logistics that would need to be sorted out now that my entire life plan had changed overnight. The list of people to tell was particularly daunting. My parents, who had been so excited about David's proposal that they had immediately started planning a visit to meet his family. My coworkers, who had been buzzing with excitement yesterday when I showed them my ring. Friends who had been expecting wedding invitations in the coming months. Each conversation would require me to explain what had happened, to relive the humiliation and pain of discovering that the man I loved had been living a lie for years. But the alternative, pretending everything was fine while I slowly fell apart inside, seemed infinitely worse. My phone had been buzzing intermittently throughout the morning with messages from David, but I hadn't looked at any of them. I wasn't ready to engage with his attempts to minimize or explain away what he had done. Around noon, I gathered the courage to turn my phone back on and read through his messages. Most of them were variations on the same theme. He was sorry, he wanted to talk, he thought we could work things out if we approached the situation rationally. The last message was different. Rebecca and I have ended things. I realized that what we had was based on the excitement of secrecy rather than genuine compatibility. I want to work on our relationship, to become the man you deserve. I read the message 3 times, each time feeling a different emotion. First, disbelief. Then anger. Finally, a kind of sad resignation. He thought he could have his crisis, explore his feelings for another woman, and then come back to me when it didn't work out the way he had hoped. He thought I would be waiting, safe and predictable as always, ready to forgive and forget because that was the convenient thing to do. I called him back, something I hadn't planned to do but suddenly felt compelled to. "Sarah," he answered on the first ring. "I'm so glad you called. Did you get my message?" "I got it. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I want to make things right. What Rebecca and I had wasn't real love, it was just the thrill of something forbidden. What you and I have is deeper, more substantial. What you and I have," I repeated slowly, "is 4 years of you pretending to feel something you didn't actually feel. That's not true. I do love you. Maybe not in the same way I thought I loved Rebecca, but in a more mature, stable way." There it was again. Stable. Safe. The words he thought were compliments, but that felt like insults every time he said them. "David, do you hear yourself? You're describing the way someone loves a good friend, not the way someone loves the person they want to marry. Maybe that's healthier. Maybe what Rebecca and I had was too intense to last." Maybe what you and I have is the kind of love that builds a real life together. I closed my eyes, amazed at his ability to convince himself that settling for me was actually the noble choice. I don't want to be your consolation prize, I said. I don't want to be the woman you choose because the woman you actually want is too complicated. You're not a consolation prize. I'm the safe choice. I'm the woman who won't challenge you or make you question yourself or push you to grow. I'm the woman who will smile and say yes and make your life easier. There's nothing wrong with wanting an easy life with someone who makes you happy. But I don't make you happy, David. Not really. I make you comfortable. There's a difference. The silence stretched between us, and I could hear him breathing, probably trying to find words that would convince me I was wrong. I'm not coming back, I said before he could speak. Whatever you and Rebecca decide to do about your relationship is between the two of you, but I'm done being part of this triangle. Sarah, please. Don't throw away 4 years over a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, David. It was a choice. You chose her over me every day for 2 years. You chose to lie to me, to build our relationship on a foundation of deception. You chose to propose to me not because you wanted to marry me, but because you thought it would solve your guilt. I can change. I can be the man you need me to be. I don't want you to change for me. I want to be with someone who doesn't need to change to love me the way I deserve to be loved. I hung up the phone and sat for a moment in Emma's quiet apartment, feeling something shift inside me. For the first time since discovering David's betrayal, I felt like I was making a choice rather than simply reacting to his choices. The apartment looked different when I returned that afternoon. The morning light that had seemed so golden and hopeful just 2 days ago now felt harsh and revealing. I could see dust on surfaces I had never noticed before, small imperfections that had been hidden by the soft focus of love. David wasn't there, which I was grateful for. I needed to pack my belongings and sort through our shared possessions without his presence clouding my judgment or his voice trying to talk me out of the decision I had made. I started in the bedroom, folding clothes and placing them carefully in boxes. Each item told a story of our life together. The dress I had worn on our first anniversary. The sweater he had bought me for my birthday last year. The pajamas I had been wearing when he proposed, just 2 nights ago. It was strange how quickly these objects had been transformed from treasured possessions into artifacts of a relationship that no longer existed. They weren't exactly painful to look at, but they felt hollow now, drained of the meaning they had held when I believed our love was real and reciprocated. In the closet, I found a shoebox that contained mementos from our relationship. Ticket stubs from movies we had seen together. Photos from vacations and celebrations. Cards he had given me for various holidays and occasions. I sat on the bedroom floor and went through them one by one, looking for signs I had missed, clues that might have warned me about what was coming. In one photo, taken at his office Christmas party last year, I could see Rebecca in the background. She was laughing at something someone had said, her head thrown back in genuine joy. David was standing beside me in the photo, his arm around my waist, but his eyes were focused somewhere off camera. Now I knew where he had been looking. I found a card he had given me for Valentine's Day this year. The message inside was sweet but generic. To my wonderful girlfriend, thank you for being such an important part of my life. Important part of my life. Not the love of my life, not his everything, just an important part. How had I not noticed the careful distance in his words? There was a photo from our weekend trip to the mountains last fall. We looked happy together, smiling at the camera with our arms around each other. But I remembered that weekend now with new eyes. David had been distracted the entire time, constantly checking his phone, claiming it was work emergencies. I had felt like I was competing for his attention, but I had blamed it on his stressful job rather than considering that his attention might be focused on someone else entirely. The most painful discovery was a small notebook where I had been jotting down wedding ideas. Pages of thoughts about venues, flowers, guest lists, honeymoon destinations. I had been so excited about planning our future together, so invested in the idea of becoming his wife. Every page was filled with dreams that had been built on nothing more substantial than my own wishful thinking. I closed the notebook and added it to a box of things I would throw away. There was no point in keeping reminders of a future that had never been real. As I packed, I found myself thinking about Rebecca. I had met her several times at David's work events, and she had always been polite but distant with me. I had attributed her coolness to shyness or professional reserve, but now I realized it must have been incredibly difficult for her to make small talk with the woman whose fiancé she was in love with. What must those interactions have been like for her? Standing in the same room as David and me, watching us together, knowing that he came home to me every night while wishing he was coming home to her instead. I almost felt sorry for her, trapped in a relationship that couldn't be acknowledged publicly, always waiting for David to choose between his obligation to me and his desire for her. But my sympathy only went so far. She had known about me from the beginning. She had chosen to pursue a relationship with a man who was already committed to someone else. She had been willing to accept the role of the other woman, to wait patiently while he lived his double life. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my mother. "Sarah, honey, how are you feeling? Still floating on cloud 9 from the proposal?" I closed my eyes, steeling myself for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. "Mom, I need to tell you something. David and the engagement is off." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I wondered if we had been disconnected. "What do you mean, off?" she asked finally. "I mean we're not getting married. The relationship is over." But that's impossible. He just proposed 2 days ago." "What happened?" I gave her a brief, sanitized version of events. David had been involved with someone else. The proposal hadn't been genuine. We had decided to end things rather than try to work through such a fundamental breach of trust. "Oh, sweetheart," my mother said, her voice heavy with sympathy and disbelief. "I'm so sorry. I know how much you loved him." I did love him. But I can't stay with someone who doesn't love me the same way. Maybe he just got confused. Maybe it was a mistake he regrets. I understood my mother's impulse to find a way to fix this, to believe that love could overcome any obstacle. She and my father had been married for 32 years, and their relationship had been built on genuine mutual devotion from the beginning. She couldn't fathom how someone could fake that kind of connection for years. "It wasn't a mistake, Mom. It was a choice he made every day for 2 years." We talked for another few minutes, my mother alternating between trying to comfort me and trying to understand how something that had seemed so solid could fall apart so quickly. When we hung up, I felt drained but also relieved. The first difficult conversation was behind me, and I had survived it. Over the next few hours, I made similar calls to my father, my closest friends, and my supervisor at work. Each conversation was painful in its own way, but they also served to solidify my decision. Every time I explained what had happened, I felt more certain that leaving was the right choice. Some people tried to talk me out of it. They suggested couples therapy, time apart to think things through, forgiveness as a path to healing. But I knew that no amount of therapy could change the fundamental truth that David had never loved me the way I loved him. By evening, I had packed everything that mattered to me. The apartment looked strangely empty with my belongings gone, as if I had never really lived there at all. David's things remained, but without my touches to soften the space, it felt cold and impersonal. I left my key on the kitchen counter beside a note explaining that I had taken what belonged to me and left everything else. I didn't ask for anything from him, didn't demand explanations or apologies or promises to do better. I simply said goodbye to the life I had thought I wanted and walked away. Emma was waiting for me when I returned to her apartment, armed with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant and a bottle of wine. She didn't ask how the packing had gone or whether I had talked to David. She simply created space for me to exist in whatever emotional state I was in. "I keep thinking about what I would have done differently," I said as we ate dinner on her couch. "If I had been more exciting, more challenging, more like Rebecca, would he have chosen me instead?" "Sarah, no. His inability to love you completely wasn't about any deficiency in you. Some people just aren't capable of the kind of love you deserve. But Rebecca inspired that kind of love in him." Did she? Or did the secrecy and the impossibility of their situation create an intensity that he mistook for deeper love? It's easy to be passionate about something you can't have. It's much harder to build real intimacy with someone who knows all of your flaws and chooses to stay anyway. I considered her words, rolling them around in my mind like stones in a tumbler, smoothing their rough edges until they began to make sense. Maybe you're right. Maybe what he felt for her wasn't really love at all, just the excitement of wanting something forbidden. And maybe what he felt for you was real love, just not the exclusive, all-consuming kind you needed. Some people are capable of loving multiple people at the same time, but they convince themselves that the most comfortable option is the right choice. Either way, I can't build a life with someone who sees me as a consolation prize. Emma raised her wine glass. "To refusing to settle for anything less than you deserve." 3 months have passed since that devastating evening in David's office. I've moved into my own apartment, a small but bright space in a neighborhood I've always loved. It's different from the life I had planned, but it's entirely mine in a way I haven't experienced since before David and I moved in together. Emma helped me create a space that reflects who I am rather than who I thought I should be as half of a couple. The walls are painted in colors I love, not neutral tones chosen for their broad appeal. The furniture is comfortable and inviting rather than formally coordinated. Every object in my home is there because it brings me joy, not because it fits some vision of what a proper adult life should look like. I've heard through mutual friends that David and Rebecca tried to make their relationship work publicly, but it lasted less than a month before they realized that their connection had been built on the thrill of secrecy rather than genuine compatibility. He's dating someone new now, a colleague from his company who apparently finds his reliability attractive. I hope he's learned to be honest about his feelings from the beginning this time. Some days are harder than others. I still sometimes reach for my phone to share something funny or interesting with him before remembering that he's no longer part of my daily life. I still occasionally have dreams about our wedding, waking up disoriented and sad. But those moments are becoming less frequent, less devastating. What surprises me most is how much I've grown to enjoy my solitude. For years, I defined myself in relation to David, measuring my worth by how well I fulfilled the role of supportive girlfriend. Now I'm discovering parts of myself that had been dormant, interests and dreams I had set aside to focus on building a life with someone else. I've started taking painting classes, something I had always wanted to do but never made time for. I've begun traveling alone, visiting places I had always assumed I would see with a partner someday. I've deepened friendships that had taken a back seat to my relationship, rediscovering the joy of connections built on shared interests rather than romantic obligation. The love I believed in was indeed the biggest betrayal, but not in the way I originally understood. The betrayal wasn't David's deception, painful as that was. The real betrayal was my willingness to accept a love that diminished me, to convince myself that being chosen for my safety and predictability was the same as being chosen for my irreplaceable worth. I deserved to be someone's first choice, not their sensible option. I deserved to be loved with the same intensity and devotion I was willing to give. I deserved a partnership built on mutual passion rather than comfortable convenience. Now I know these things not as abstract concepts but as lived truths. I will never again accept a love that asks me to make myself smaller, quieter, more palatable. I will never again mistake tolerance for acceptance or convenience for commitment. The love I believed in may have been a betrayal, but it taught me what real love should look like. And someday, when I'm ready, I'll be able to recognize it when it appears.